Well, good evening. It's 6:30. We'd like to get our webinar started. Welcome to our webinar for redistricting for the Teays Valley School District. I'm Kyle Wolf, Superintendent at Teays Valley. I'm glad you're taking time to learn more about the redistricting process. For those unfamiliar with redistricting, it involves adjusting the boundaries within our school district to determine which students attend each school. Redistricting has become necessary because some of our schools are nearing, at, or exceeding capacity. As a result of the redistricting process, some students will attend different Teays Valley schools starting with the 25-26 school year or next school year. The district has been very transparent about the need to shift student enrollment to schools with available space, ensuring that all of our students receive the appropriate resources for their education. What has led to the need for redistricting? The Teays Valley School District has grown by over 850 students in the past 10 years. An enrollment study completed this past July indicates that in the next 10 years, the district will grow by 20% or almost 1,000 students. Our current enrollment is over 4,600 students, and we employ close to 600 individuals, making Teays Valley the largest employer in Pickaway County. The district planned for current and future growth by placing a bond issue to build buildings on the ballot in March of 2024, which was defeated by the voters. As the district adds students each year, it has created challenges in housing students, educating our students, and best meeting the needs of our students. The district added 4 modular classrooms at South Bloomfield Elementary and 2 modular classrooms to Walnut Elementary during the 23-24 school year, and will continue to utilize them until we have appropriate space to educate our students. Across the district, students are being educated in spaces that were not intended for that purpose. Hallways, book rooms, closets, stages, and teacher workrooms are now being used for classroom space and counseling sessions due to overcrowding. At Teays Valley West Middle School, class sizes have increased up to 35 students per classroom in some instances. Also at West, we do not have enough student lockers to provide a locker to each student in the school. South Bloomfield Elementary has surpassed its building capacity, and Teays Valley West Middle School is nearing capacity. Other buildings, as you will see tonight, are also nearing capacity limits. At some buildings, we are unable to add teaching staff because we are out of classrooms to house additional teachers. This is also resulting in higher class sizes. We must start the process to redistribute our students and adjust school boundary lines. The district has partnered with Cropper GIS consultants who will help us guide through who will help guide us through the process. Tonight's meeting will provide you with an overview of that process. I would like to introduce Matthew Cropper and Sean Dowling of Cropper GIS to begin their part of tonight's presentation. Thank you again for participating in this webinar, and I'll turn it over to Matthew at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Wolf, and thank you everybody for participating in this webinar this evening. It's very important to have you as part of this process because you give us a lot of insights and a lot of information, a lot of insight as we continue to work through this, and the public is a critical part of this process. I am Matthew Cropper. We are with Cropper GIS Consulting, and this is just the type of work that we do all across the United States. Our specialty is school redistricting work. We also do enrollment forecasting work and facility planning work, but we are here to help the school district with a school redistricting study and following a process that we have used successfully across the country. These are just some of the school districts that we've worked in. I've selected some of the ones in Ohio, but we've worked with districts from 2,000 to 200,000 students. And we bring a lot of perspectives on how other communities have faced challenges that similar to what we are facing. And we also bring technology to the table. We have a lot of experience and background in geographic information systems, which is a mapping tool to help us accurately count students and make estimates as we continue to evaluate moving boundary lines one way or the other. Tonight, we're not sharing any options maps or boundary maps per se. That's coming down the road. The intent of tonight's meeting is just to give you an understanding of who we are, our process, and how you can follow things as we kick this process off. Like I said, I'm Matthew Cropper. I have extensive experience working with school districts on this, and honored to be working with you guys. I'm actually in Delaware, Ohio, which is just up the road, but we have staff who live all across the United States. Um, three of us live in Ohio, and so honored to be working with you guys on this study. So why are we redistricting? Why is the school district going through this? And Superintendent Wolf mentioned a lot of things, but basically the ultimate goal with this process is to evaluate the elementary and middle school attendance boundaries and look at balancing utilization amongst the schools in your district. In addition to doing that, we also want to be mindful of the socioeconomic demographics and ethnic demographics of the schools. And as we make boundary changes and balance utilization, be mindful of what the impact may be on demographic composition of the different schools. So we were hired by the district to help facilitate this process, develop all the materials and tools for you guys to be able to see what's going on and to provide input to us, to empower the community through the process and leverage our expertise in working through options and ultimately recommending a redistricting plan to the board. One thing I will say too with this webinar is you'll notice on your toolbar in Zoom, there is a Q&A button and a questions button. That's something that if you want to, you're welcome to put in a question there. And when this presentation is over, we're gonna go through some of the questions and try to answer as many as we can. If we can't answer all of the questions, we will follow up with an FAQ document and make sure that we're tracking input and questions that are being provided by the members of the public. So as we go through redistricting, we always look at a series of rules to follow. So this helps us focus on making data-driven decisions that are in the best interest for all children in the school district and not just one student or one community or one school. And these are the best practices, the criteria that we use for school redistricting studies across the United States. So these are balanced school facility utilization. So be mindful of how many seats are available in each school and give an equal number of space to each school so that they have room to grow in ebbs and flows of enrollment. While we're doing that, also be mindful of future growth. So give some areas that may have high growth potential a little more space so that they could grow into an effective utilization. Be mindful of close proximity. So try, if at all possible, assign students as close to their home as possible. Maximize busing efficiencies and be mindful of transportation and commuting patterns. So being mindful of how students are traveling to schools and how the buses travel to schools, and be mindful of that as we work on options. And anything we do, try to minimize the impact on students. Try to come up with a plan that accomplishes our objectives, but by moving the fewest number of students. And as we do this, be mindful of the impact on economic, cultural, and ethnic diversity of the schools. We want to try to make every effort to establish contiguous zones. So we don't want to go into the middle and heart of an attendance area and draw a circle around a neighborhood or an apartment complex and have that go to another school further away. It's usually best practices to have one zone per school as we do that, and it helps us align with the other criteria. And to use major roads and natural boundaries wherever feasible to define zones. So try to use the lines, the highways and major roads and water bodies or railroads and natural features as well. And so all of these criteria, think of them in a single basket, and they're not in any priority order. All these criteria are really weighted equally, and the best plan will be one that touches on these criteria as a whole as best as possible. If we focus on only one element of these criteria and not the others, we start to deviate further from the others. And so I think it should be understood or expected that we're not going to fully adhere to all of these perfectly, and that no plan is going to be perfect, but the best plan will be one that adheres to these criteria as best as possible. Let's talk a little about some of the stakeholders and people who are involved in the study. So us as consultants, I think I've covered that pretty well. We're facilitating the process, providing supporting materials, working with the district and the public and through this process. We have an internal planning team, and this is a group made up of school administrators, the central office staff, and also school administrators will be coming in on some of these meetings. And this group is the group that we'll be working through and evaluating options and preparing to maps that we can share with you at the next public information session. The general public is very important in that you guys are going to be informed through we have a website that we've developed. We have a general feedback form right now where you can start providing comments. And I'll talk a little bit about that, give you a little orientation on how to get access to that. And then we have some public information sessions coming up, or a public information session coming up that we will be being in town, and we'll share maps and be able to talk with you about maps as we go through it. And then the school board is ultimately in charge of giving us sort of the high level responsibilities. They answer more policy related questions, and they stay more back and let the internal planning team and the other stakeholders do their work. And they will receive the recommendations at the end of this study by the superintendent. And then ultimately we'll decide which plan is best for the students within the district. So let's talk about our timeline. So this is the timeline that we've been on. We've been working for a past month or two on preparing for tonight. We are here on September 18th, giving you this this webinar, just give you some background and tools and things like that. November 12th is a key date for you to mark your calendars with, because that's a date where we're actually going to be in person in the district in an evening meeting, and we're going to share some redistricting options with you and get some input from you at those meetings. So I would say for the next steps for you as members of the public, mark your calendars for November 12th and stay tuned for more details on the location and time for that, as the district will inform you. As we lead up to that date, we are working with the internal planning team to work on developing options and maps that we can bring forth to you and share with you for your input. Once that November 12th meeting is completed, we're going to have a survey that goes along with that. And then we're going to collect your input and your feedback in addition to the other information that we're welcoming you to provide up until that point. And we're going to finalize recommendations and present a redistricting plan to the board in December. And ultimately, the board will vote on a plan in January of next year. So talk a little bit about our process. We collect data, we put all the data together into our mapping system, we develop options, and then we work with the planning team, and then also public engagement. So we collect information from a lot of different sources. The school district gives us a lot of data on student information. We've mapped out the students so we know how many kids live on any particular street or any neighborhood. And that lets us make accurate and informed estimates and decisions on whether a line should move one way or not, and in adherence to those criteria. The city and the county governments give us a lot of good information on properties, addresses, property lines and roads, and a lot of and housing information. And a lot of that comes from the other local agencies. So we take this information and we put it into our GIS mapping, and we develop a lot of tools to enable the public to be able to follow what's the process and to see what's going on. One thing that you'll see is what we call planning blocks. And if you look at maps, and I'll show you these in a little bit closer detail, but we take every attendance area and break it into small pieces. Think of them as pieces of a puzzle as we're trying to move an area one way or the other, potentially to help accomplish our objectives. These planning blocks each have a planning block ID number, and below that, there's another number that tells you how many kids live inside that planning block, so that we can understand, and also you as members of the public can understand, if we move a block one way or the other, how many kids would that be? And it helps give you an understanding of the options that are being developed, how many students live in different parts of the district. And so we have a map like this for every single school. And we also have the interactive map that I'm going to share with you has these on it as well. As we develop these planning blocks, we think in terms of keeping community together. And so we don't want to draw these lines down a residential street. We want to try to be mindful of communities. And if a community moves, it moves together, if at all possible. So these planning blocks are fluid and they're draft, I would say. And if you have members of the public identify some inefficiency in the planning block, like for example, we're cutting off the end of a street somewhere inadvertently, or it would be a better way to align or better way to split the planning block, that's the kind of input that would be really helpful from now until we actually start to share maps with you and that kind of information. So I'll give you a little more information on these planning blocks when I get to the website, and I'll show you a little bit about that. We have a background report that we've developed also for this process, and we have this on our website as well. And this is just a background reference guide for you to understand key components and key data points for this process. There's information in here that I've been already shared with you, the objectives, the criteria, stakeholders, and then there's also maps in enrollment and utilization data in here. So you can see what the current enrollment is and how buildings are being utilized right now. I think that that this is a really good tool so that anybody who has any questions about redistricting, they can reference this and they don't have to speculate. Like how big is this school? How many seats does it have? Or what's the current enrollment of the school? Those types of things will help give you this report will help give you that clarity and make a consistent give you consistent information. We've put other information together into our background report that gives us an understanding of how many kids live in an area versus attend schools in the area. For example, you'll see when you look at these, you'll see a number on the top line tells us how many kids live within each attendance area. And on the down on the top to bottom on the left, it tells us how many are enrolled. So we could see that how many kids may attend from out of zone. And this helps us plan for things such as programs or be mindful and prepared to anticipate potential students coming in from out of zone for whatever reason it may be, for special programs or special permissions. There's attendance zone maps. So these are this is just a map of your current attendance boundaries that you could see how the district is currently laid out, that are included in our information. And we have an online map, and this is the map link that I'm going to go a little bit over with you. It's croppermap.com/Tays_Valley_OH. And you don't have to remember that URL because all of these resources and tools are centrally located in a website that we have built for this process. And I'll show you that here in a little bit. But the online map is a very useful tool because as you zoom in and start to look at things, you in zooming closer detail, you start to see property lines, you start to see more road labels appearing, and then you can turn on and off planning blocks. And I will show you how to interact with the online map here in a few minutes. The third phase is developing options. So this is basically the process of working with the options development. We have not done any options work yet with the internal planning team, but we're starting right after this public information session. Our focus is going to be developing options and preparing for that November meeting to share some maps with you guys. These options are, we developed some baseline maps at the beginning to give the planning team an idea of how it could look. And then this group will work through these maps and start to make adjustments. They may throw one out, build on another one. So we'll see how it works. And it's different every process that we work with in district that we work with. The fourth phase is working with the planning team and also the public. It's very important to have transparency in this process and to enable the public with the ability to see what's happening and to follow the process. And we've built things for you to be able to enable you to do that. The internal plan team is going to work between now and December to analyze data, review zones, develop maps, and then ultimately, like I said, meet with you in November ultimately bringing forth a recommendation to the school board for their consideration for a vote in early 2025. So we have a website here that I've been talking about a couple times. It's the tvsdredistricting.com. Anybody can go to that on tvsdredistricting.com, and that's going to be the best place to go find all and access all this material. So the TVS redistricting is really the best, the URL that I would remember if I were you. And on that, there's an online feedback form, and that allows you to go in there and automatically give us any input as it relates to anything related to the redistricting starting now. And we will be tracking that and looking to see if there's any feedback from the form that needs to be something that we need to adhere to or address, to see if there may be something that we may have missed, or other input or other information that's informative to help us with this study. As we work with the internal planning team and work with engaging with the public, we will be putting more materials on this website. And so keep an eye out for other materials as they get posted. We will be updating the website as the process evolves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break off of this and show you the online map here, or in the website here. So this is tvsdredistricting.com, and you'll see you have basically a background and objectives information. We have recent useful documents that you can pull up things. This is that background report that I had mentioned, so that you can take a look at that. It has a lot of key information in here. You can go to the near the end is where you start to see maps for each of the zones for elementaries and middle schools. And then there's also statistics, enrollment, and utilization data that's over here. So this is information that you can start to look at. And when we start getting into options, we'll give you more familiar with some of the data and information in terms of the statistics and the utilization and all of that. But I would encourage you to look at the background report and see what you think, if there's any, and to further understand some of the information that we're working with. As you scroll down, you'll see the timeline, and then other information is located in sort of their individual sections. So we have project maps, and this is just a location where you have the large format maps. As we work and continue with this process, we will be putting the options maps on here so that you can start to look at them. But these are just some baseline project maps for starters. We have the online map, which this is really, I think, is the most useful way to better understand your district. It's something that we will use with the internal planning team, and also as consultants, it helps us to better understand things. If you're using this on a phone, you may look like this. You won't see your left side, and you'll notice there's like a little white box with an arrow on it. If you tap on that with your phone, it'll pull out your options for layers. And if you click on this, you can start to see information that's available. So we have the planning blocks, and you'll click on the top one, and then you'll click on the bottom one. And this gives you the planning block data. And you could see it has a planning block number and a number of students listed right below it. And we can look at that for elementary, middle schools, 6th through 8th graders, and then high school as well. So those are some of the count, so you can understand how many kids live within each of these blocks. We provided high school counts just for your information. Of course, there's only one high school in this district, and so there's no redistricting involved with that. But you could turn on the elementary and middle school boundaries and see how they differ. And as you zoom in on this map, more detail starts to show up. So as I'm going in, you start to see more layers, more labels. You can keep zooming in. You start to see property lines and things like that. And this gives you a better understanding of kind of really the details and ins and outs of how the zones are shaped and where they follow and how they're configured currently. When we get into our options work, these planning blocks will start to shuffle around and move to align with our criteria. And you'll be able to turn on option 1, option 2, however many options we have to share with you at that particular time. You have the general feedback form as well. And this is a really good place for you just to immediately go and just give us, it's really basic right now. Just give us any input you have related to the study, any questions or comments, you can put them in here and we'll be tracking this. This is the best way to collect input as opposed to emails, because this all gets centralized and stored in one spot and nothing falls through the cracks and an email gets lost to one person. This helps us make sure that we get all input and it's in a centralized location. And then as you see, we have our public information section section right here. And as we continue to work through the process, more information, you'll start to see more boxes pop up with other information as we start to get closer to having maps ready to share with you as members of the public. So the next public information session is Tuesday, November the 12th. And that's going to be like a gallery walk type format where we'll have a presentation in an auditorium or a cafeteria, something like that. And then we'll invite the public to come look at maps that'll be on easels. And there'll also be statistics next to the maps. And you'll have the opportunity to talk with myself and staff, as well as members of the internal planning team about your thoughts about the maps. And then there'll be a survey that goes along with that. So with that said, that's all I have in terms of this presentation. I think now what we are going to do is take a look and see if there are any questions that we can help answer, and maybe see that we can cover these. So I'm going to go ahead and go through some of these questions, and appreciate the questions that you have already provided. So one of the comments or questions is, there's no doubt that the community has grown. Almost 850 students is a lot. I'm sure it has caused stress on the existing infrastructure. My question is, with all the new housing developments, the average home value has almost doubled. How is this additional property tax being utilized to address the overcrowding? So, and this particular effort doesn't involve any capital improvements or renovations or expansions to schools. This is basically, the focus of this is to leverage the buildings and the space that you have available right now to work with. And so I don't really think that's applicable to the redistricting effort. That's more of a question about long-term needs for facilities. And another question, was this level of growth not projected accurately when the district was designing and building South Bloomfield, which is a newer school? What are we doing to ensure estimates are accurate in the future? I think it's as we work through this process, we're going to do our best to ensure that we're as proactive as possible and that these boundaries hold as long as they possibly can. Will you guys be doing an intermediate school? So I don't know. It's possible that we may evaluate changes in grade configurations of schools. But again, I think that everything we do, we'll keep looking back at the criteria and try to provide a solution that minimizes the impact. And so I don't know if that's something that is going to be considered or not, but it may be if it helps bring us as close as possible to adhering to our criteria. What is the cost to the school district for this study? I don't know the actual cost off the top of my head, but I think it's somewhere around $75,000. I think somewhere around there is about a ballpark estimate for about how much this study, the redistricting study, is costing. Are we going to try to even out the current economic groups between the schools, or are we only looking at the economic breakdowns of incoming students? And so as we work through our data, we'll be looking at the current demographic information of schools. And then when we develop options, we'll see what the impact is on those particular demographics. So we will be looking at both race and ethnicity and socioeconomics as part of this, and just making sure that we're not creating any imbalances in demographics as we work towards a solution. And there's a question about will the levy go back on the next ballot? I think that's something that's probably not pertinent to this discussion. We are under the assumption that we're working with the space and the schools that you have right now in the district, and that's our charge, is to work with you to fully leverage that space as the district continues to manage ongoing changes in enrollment. If new buildings are approved, will there be another need for redistricting again? And so, yes, I think that if anytime a new building comes online, usually there's a need to make changes to boundaries if it's going to have the same grade configuration. I'm not going to speculate on that. And it's not something that we're focused on in terms of new buildings. It's not part of our charge or our efforts here. And so that's something that's, I think, further down the road, a decision that the district will have to make as they continue to plan for the students in this district. Question, my understanding is that the bond levy did not pass. Is that why we're looking at redistricting? Is that correct? And so I think that that's probably part of it, in that the district, since they don't have funding for new facilities or new expanded facilities at the moment, we are looking at ways to fully leverage the space, provide relief to schools that are overcrowded, and balance building utilization within your district. What's the expected useful life of this research? 2 years, 5 years? These usually hold very well. Boundaries, I would expect in this district to hold 5 to 10 years, maybe longer. Sometimes it really depends on the amount of growth and change that's going on in a district, within your district, how many houses are being built, and those types of things. But these boundaries usually hold for a good amount of time. Definitely longer than 5 years. But we'll just have to see. Some places have a lot more growth and change than others, and so that's just something that really we'll have to determine. But we are trying to do these so that they can hold as long as possible. So this process is to fully utilize buildings, not determine where new buildings are needed. And yes, that is correct. We are basically working to fully utilize the buildings. This is not involving any kind of analysis to determine where to put new buildings. This is just basically trying to figure out a best plan for fully leveraging the buildings that you have right now. Could there be an option where elementary and middle school boundaries don't exactly overlap? That's what we call feeder patterns. And so we will be monitoring and tracking the progression from an elementary to a middle school. Ideally, in a perfect world, you'll have 100% of an elementary feed into the same middle school. There are times, though, where an elementary sometimes has to split to 2 middle schools. And if that happens, it's best to have that split be balanced. So 50% to one and 50% to the other. What we want to avoid is a very small percentage of an elementary school going to a different middle school. Say 95% of an elementary goes to one middle and only 5% of the kids go to another middle. We want to be mindful of kids. They make friends, they're developing bonds and relationships in elementary, so that when they go to the next level, they have familiar faces and people that they're comfortable with. But we will try to achieve 100% feeder if at all possible as we work through this. Is all the data available in open source form? No, the data that we use is provided by the district. And so it's information that we get from the school district. And that includes student information and the address, so that we can map out the kids and do an accurate estimates as we work through our process. How is the process this time around different from the last redistricting effort? Well, we have not done this before with Teys Valley, so I'm not really sure. I do know that this process is proven and tested and true, and it works. We've done it successfully for districts across the U.S., and that's the process that we're in the midst of right now. How old are the enrollment numbers used for this process? They're building all over. Numbers will be largely changing before 25-26 school year. So we're working with current enrollment as we work through this, knowing that it's a moving target when it comes to enrollment. There's always students enrolling and withdrawing. but it's best to plan with the students that we know where they are, so that builds a foundation, a baseline for boundary changes and for your student enrollment, and in being as proactive as possible to give space so that you can grow into the grow into change or growth that may be coming. Will this redistricting only affect elementary, or will middle school students be impacted? So yes, it's very possible that middle school students will be impacted as part of this as well. We are evaluating elementary and middle schools to try to align both of them with the criteria that we mentioned, and also be mindful of the feeder patterns, utilization, and those types of things as well. Is the number of students by grade level similar for each grade? If not, will we include the possibility of splitting schools by grade level? I think that what we're first going to try to do is minimize the impact and try to maintain the configurations that you have right now. But if there's an opportunity to make a change to bring us close to our criteria, it's something that we may consider. High school is not part of this. It's only elementaries and middle schools. I don't know anything about high school capacity, so the high schools are really not part of our focus. Let's see. Is it possible for middle schoolers to go over to the high school? Say eighth graders get moved to the high school. That may be something to be considered if it's something that helps provide relief. I know that your middle schools, and starting to look at the data, your middle schools have some available capacity. So we usually only see eighth grade being moved out of middle schools if they're operating well over 100%, and there's a need to bring middle school utilization down into the below 100 or to an effective utilization. We'll have to see, but I wouldn't speculate, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen. It's possible that we could look at moving grades to different schools. Will special ed kids be moved away from their home school and have program placement again? I think that the district will go through the whole process of enrolling students in special programs as they normally do when this process is completed. And I imagine that they will still offer the same type of process to ensure that students are assigned to the school that they need for any program that's suitable for them. We don't know projected growth of housing or students as of now, but we are looking at information that the district has developed and has collected throughout their planning work. So we will be leveraging enrollment projection data and other information that the school district has available. The proposed maps, question about the proposed maps, those will be available for viewing on November 12th. And that's when we will be sharing those maps with the public and getting input from you at that time. It's possible that we may put those maps out prior, but we want to make sure that we don't put them out too soon while we're still considering boundary changes, and that we give maps to you that are viable and ones that could actually be potentially implemented. Do your numbers include Digital Academy students? We do have all student enrollment, but we will be keeping students, holding things constant and making sure that we preserve programs. If the program is still in place, we'll make sure that as we estimate enrollment, we won't be negatively affecting kids who are participating in any particular program. Aside from shifting boundary lines, will this study address bell times, the busing issues, by looking into changing starting times at the middle school while simultaneously shifting boundary lines? It's possible that as we work through this, the district can work to think about ways to make transportation more efficient and effective for parents and communities. So it's not something that we're certain we're going to do or the district is going to do, but I wouldn't say that it's something that's off the table. As they work to implement a boundary change plan, they may coincide that with other changes to help make sure that things are running as efficiently as possible. And The last question I see is, would you look at fifth to move to middle school? So I think that touches back on the other things I've talked about, grade configuration changes. It's possible that grade configuration changes could be considered, but I will say that we are looking to minimize the impact, try to move as few students as possible and impact as few families as possible as we work through a redistricting recommendation. And there have been some questions that the superintendent has answered, and you could see those in the Q&A. And so I think that those are there for your benefit. And so that is all of the questions. Let me see, a couple more. You spoke of a working focus group. Is there parents, kids, or community stakeholders in the group? No, the working group is made up of school administrators and central office, and so they are the ones who are working through the redistricting options and development. They're not there. We don't have parents or kids or communities involved in that part of the process. Although I would encourage you to go back, look at the presentation, and look at the website, tvsdredistricting.com, to learn more about all the stakeholders and people who are working on this study. And then there's another question about potential split sessions, and that's something that I wouldn't be able to answer. It's not a redistricting discussion. I think that would be a question for somebody at the district that could answer that outside of the redistricting focus. So I think that's about all we have in terms of questions and answers. I just want to thank everybody for your participation and your time and being on this webinar. I think we almost had over 300 people watching this, and so that's very good that you're informed and being part of this process. Keep an eye out for the next communications for the next public information session on November 12th. And that's where we will be meeting up with you and sharing some maps and starting to look at actual options for how boundaries are being considered to move. So with that said, thank you again, and I hope you all have a very good evening, and we look forward to working with you on this process. Have a good night.